Hello, can you guys hear me? Great. How's everyone doing? Awesome. All right. So we're gonna start with some fun gameplay footage. So this is Martian Resident, and as you can see, we have some more UI updates, and then we also have some awesome first-person uh, viewing angles here. Yeah. So basically, we're in the buggy. And yeah, you can see we have the first person view working here. Yeah, and you can imagine how this looks, in VR, of course. Yeah, exactly, Stephanie. So we've made a lot of progress on the visuals here, the rendering of it, and we're working a lot on the narrative right now. So we really want the game to become something of a campaign mode, and then we're going to incorporate a few multiplayer elements, especially with the vehicle traversal and the racing. So we're really working hard on this, and we want to make sure that Martian Resident becomes something that is of very high quality. So the reason it's a movie is this is a recording from our developers, and of course we'll have a build that will eventually publish. But right now, this is the easiest way, basically, for us to record the footage and showcase it to everyone. So now we're entering sort of the construction area. Yeah, you can see some of the diggers. But I do think that it creates a lot more of an interesting perspective for the gameplay. And we'll be working on some of the UI, the glass effects, that sort of thing. But I do think traversal will be a big part of Martian Resident. And yeah, you can basically see how it's coming up. So it's not a web game, so this will be downloadable on Epic Games Store, and it's a game built in Unreal. All right, so yeah, Martian Resident, we're continuing to build out the game. Our first version, our goal is to have a campaign mode, probably 4 or 5 hours, and we'd like to launch it on Steam. We're also looking at the right partners for the blockchain element of it. And then we'll have a multiplayer element as well. So the multiplayer element will most likely be racing, but we're still finalizing the details there. So that's Martian Residence. And then for Opal Adventure, we are working hard on the second version of the game. I released a couple videos last week. One of them was focused on the roadmap for Opal Adventure, and that game will really evolve into more of a strategic idle mining game. And we're going to have things related to a resource chain, and then you can upgrade items, manage a fleet of astronauts, and then we have a commander, which will be a unique astronaut that you can use to go on raids. And I think that'll be a really interesting concept as well. So we'll jump into the development of that game, and we should have something to show for that probably in the next couple of weeks. And then Outpost Surge, I'll show a few things that are developing from that angle as well. Give me a moment. All right, so I think I talked about this last week, but the movement of the map here is free movement now. So we don't have it tied to hexes. You can basically move astronauts and vehicles independent of the grid. And then the other thing that you can see here is that we have missions that are basically arriving as rockets, and those are arriving on the map. And missions now, you basically need to collect samples, and those samples can be from different regions on the map. And you need to bring those samples to the rocket ships and then refuel them in order to complete the missions. So we have it more tied to the movement of astronauts and the specific locations of the rockets on the map. And there's a lot more management of completing missions, getting points for that. And you can also see we have some different mountains and craters on the map. So those are creating a little bit more variation between things that get in your way, basically, as you're moving around the map. And I think I can show one other video around regions real quick. Yeah, I don't know if I can get that to render right now, but basically there's different regions on the map for Outpost Surge, and the different regions have resources that you'll need to mine in order to complete certain missions. So, yeah, I mean, I think the missions themselves are going to be a lot more of a strategic angle to the game. And I think within the next 2 weeks, we should have a full gameplay loop to test with you guys, and we can also stream that and get you guys looking at basically how the entire game is working. So, yeah, I mean, right now the team is pretty deep into just development, gameplay design, and sort of doing some internal testing to make sure that those games are as strong as possible. And we're also looking at mission control and a few things to do there. So I'm happy to take any questions with mission control as well. But that's really where the focus of the team is right now. Hello, Big Man Things. How you doing? Does anyone have any questions? How will Martian Resident and Mission Control intersect or be interconnected? Yeah, so one of the things that we're looking at for Mission Control is, number one, what's the right blockchain for us to integrate with? And I would say generally with the new games, our focus is really to have the game sustainable without necessarily needing a blockchain element, meaning that the game itself is really fun to play and the revenue streams are coming from in-game sales. And the theory there is that if the game's profitable without needing a blockchain element, then it's possible for a portion of the profits to be redistributed back to a potential blockchain element. For instance, a portion of the profits can be used to purchase whatever token is related to that game, which is obviously useful for upwards pressure of that token. So that's really the perspective that we're taking. And the newer games that we're building are all also able to be distributed on platforms such as mobile devices, uh, consoles, Epic Game Store, PC, etc. So that's really where we think blockchain gaming is going, where the games themselves need to be fun, need to be playable, and interesting in and of themselves. And the blockchain element is sort of secondary to those games. We think that's a more sustainable future for the games. And so Martian Resident, Outpost Surge, and Opal Adventure all have that in common. Now, we're looking at a Mars loyalty point program. And just give me a minute here because I might lose connection. So I'll come back in a minute. Yeah, so as I was saying, basically the Mars loyalty program, the idea is to have our games using a token that is only possible to get if you're staking liquidity. And the reason to stake liquidity is we're actually looking at gamifying liquidity, especially in Opal Adventure, where you basically have earnings from the resource chain in Opal Adventure, and commanders from other players can raid your Opal if it's not staked for liquidity. So we think that that's a pretty interesting way to gamify liquidity, and we're looking at ways to integrate that into the other games as well. Because if there's a way for people to rebalance basically like token amounts from different players in a competitive way, that's a bit more of a sustainable tokenomic model. And then if you combine that with incentivizing liquidity through game actions, you have a really interesting sustainable tokenomic model. So the reason we don't want to completely get rid of the hex borders is because we've designed the resource chain in Outpost Surge to utilize the hex borders, meaning that if you have adjacent hexes, you can actually connect items to your resource chain. So if you have a solar panel and that's connected to a fuel plant, the fuel plant can use the power from the solar panel if it's connected adjacently. And so we're still using the hex grid to run the resource chain part of the game. And the resource chain part of the game is strategic because you need to make sure that your ice mining rigs are on ice deposits in order to mine the water needed to produce the water. And then you can, if that's adjacent to a fuel plant, then you can use that to produce fuel. Yeah, update on land. So there's a lot that we're doing right now, and I think it's important for us to just keep some focus on Outpost Surge at the moment. Land is definitely still on the roadmap, and we still want to put that into the mission control experience. But at the moment, we are focused on Outpost Surge. But with Marcia and mission control, one of our top priorities is figuring out how to bring that into the larger ecosystem. And either that's through the liquidity program that I just mentioned, or potentially through some other cross-game initiatives. But we're currently looking at that, and that's something that basically is like top of mind right now. So for updates on parts crafting with lower rarity base cards, so basically two things that we're looking to put into mission control. One is We want to make sure that the onboarding experience is great. So we're looking at some ways to integrate the tutorials into the game. And then lower rarity base card crafting, we're also working on. But the devs are really going strong on Outpost Surge and Opal Adventure, so we don't really want to take them off that right now. So that's going to be coming in pretty soon, but it's just more of a development management thing right now to make sure that we get some of the key features out and we can start game testing Outpost Surge and Opal Adventure before we get too far into updating mission control with some of those things. Berachain is going strong. I was able to talk to Smokey and others at Token 2049. We are applied to the Bera grants program that they have active right now. And I believe they will probably launch in Q1 of 2025. If that's the case, we should be ready to go with Outpost Surge. So, yeah, I mean, we're basically just waiting for them to launch. And then Outpost Surge will also have a lot of really interesting updates. I mean, the game is basically, we've totally remade it into something that's significantly more strategically interesting. So, and we're very close at actually getting the loop done. So I can't wait to share that with you guys because I think you'll like it a lot. But yeah, I mean, Berachain is still going strong with Outpost Surge. And then for Opal, we're also talking with connections in the TON ecosystem. We're looking at a couple other chains. But yeah, I mean, the focus there is really making it a great game and then figuring out the right blockchain component to put it on. Any other questions? Bear meat. Cool. Thanks, guys, for hopping on. I think we're good for this week. So, yeah. If you guys have any other questions, post them in the chat. And thanks for tuning in.